You are now listening to sounds from the belly of the beast. You're about to hear an interview with local journalist and writer Arturo Dominguez regarding his latest piece for Unicorn Riot on the crisis within the Harris County criminal legal system. All right, everyone, how's it going? This is Demetrius here with Belly of the Beast. This is Sounds of the Beast. I'm here interviewing journalist and writer Arturo Dominguez. He has written for Latino Rebel, and Unicorn Riot, and he is the creator of Antagonist Magazine. Arturo, thank you so much for joining us on Sounds of the Beast.
Oh man, I appreciate it. Happy to be here. Glad to be with, talking to some more local people,
For sure.
about some of the stuff going on.
Yes, it's a lot of shit going on.
Yeah,
me
no
and
doubt.
me and some comrades read your piece. I immediately shared it as soon as I saw Unicorn Riot drop it on Twitter, and I was like, "Yo, we got to read it." And it was everything that I expected, but worse. This issue with
Yeah.
Harris County Jail has been going on for some years now, and it only seems to be accelerating. So, the first question I wanted to ask is, what prompted you to write this piece? Like what pushed you to want to write this?
Well, it was brought to my attention by the founder of the Civil Rights Corps, Alec. I'm not even going to try to say his last name because I'm going to butcher it and I'm going to feel really bad. But he brought it to my attention on Twitter because it was late August, early September. I think we were at like 19 deaths at that point, and I was under the impression he was trying to get national attention on it, and nobody would pick up on it. And I'm in a few groups that I associate with people, a lot of abolitionists, stuff like that, a lot of academics that are in the abolitionist movement and stuff. So, we had been talking throughout the year about the spike in jail deaths and the spike in overall police violence. And when Alec, brought this to my attention, I thought to myself, I knew it was bad in LA. I knew it was bad at Rikers. I knew it was bad everywhere. But when, he started telling me about 19 deaths in Houston by the end of August, I thought, we're a little worse off than some people here. Like, how is this not getting attention? And I know, like Rikers has half the population that the Harris County Jail does. And they had, I think, I can't remember, something like 17 or 18 deaths last year. And, we were at 19 in August, and I thought, this is going to be bad. And sure enough, it got worse because in the winter, it always gets worse. The jail always gets fuller, you know. So, yeah, it's, I've spent a couple nights in that place myself, and it was probably 20 years ago, and it was really bad then, so and it was for disorderly conduct. I was just thrown in there for whatever, but um, yeah, it was bad then, and it just seems like it's just steadily gotten worse. And the more I talked to Alec, and he started sharing data with me and things like that, I was like, I really gotta dig in on this because there was a lot of you could see Kim Ogg's office is just not doing anything right as far as like the jail goes. They just keep packing more people in, and they're not trying to let people out. So it just you started seeing the delays in people getting processed. A lot of that was from Senate Bill 6, and we can get into that a little bit more later. But yeah, there's a lot of issues that are coming into play, and it's basically just all finger pointing. The sheriff wants to point at judges in the DA's office. Judges want to point at the sheriff in the DA's office, and everybody's just like, you try to talk to the mayor, and they're like, "Oh, the county runs the jail. That ain't got nothing to do with us." And my view on it is the jail sits inside the city of Houston. You should have something to say about it. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I'm pretty disappointed with our current leadership across the board, man. Because like I don't know, they're just real dismissive, um, and they just got I don't know. They the whole presumption of innocence seems to have gone out the window. And they just want to just I don't know keep people in there, and it just doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't.
Yeah, and we're I mean, here in Texas, we've seen the total irrationality of so-called leadership here. I mean, to me, you know, I mean, it's never been legitimate for me, but the legitimacy went out the window with the snowstorm. I mean,
Mm,
that was just and everything with the energy grid. I mean, that was just hellacious. That was just I mean, and they've totally
yeah,
just abandoned us. It totally abandoned us, and that seems to be the same issue here with Harris County Jail, and so. Um, could you just give us like a quick summation of like what exactly is going on in terms of like the conditions of the jail and like what the abuses are? Would you be able to give us just an overall summation of your piece?
yeah. Obviously, it starts with failure to expedite these cases, whether they decide to prosecute them, dismiss them, or whatever. Um, we saw after Hurricane Harvey, backlog was bad. Cases were starting to pile up, and there were increasing numbers of cases every year. And then when COVID struck, we were already, neck deep in cases, and then they had to shut the courthouse down, and that was another major setback. Um, then like the freeze, you have all these other issues that little by little continue to pile on, right? So that's the one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is, like I mentioned previously, Kim Ogg's office. Now, after there's statistics on this from, I believe it's the JMI, the Jail Management Institute. Anyway, and I've seen it in several other places. When a case sits on the docket for longer than, say, roughly 300 days, uh, the chance of actual conviction is less than 40%. And then when there is like any kind of conviction, you're just releasing people back on probation into the community, right? So based on that logic, why is the average stay in the Harris County Jail 200 days? Why are people waiting 3, 4, and 5 years just to go to court? People that are, maybe have bailed out and stuff. I mean, there's the backlog is just tremendous, and the unwillingness to let go of, like, say, nonviolent felony cases, right? That would dump a lot right there, ease up the backlog quite a bit on felony cases on the docket. But then you also have the issue of pretrial release or lack thereof, because um, it's something like 80% of detainees in the jail are pretrial released. Um, uh, Close to 90% are probably on bonds $10,000 or less. So you're holding people for $1,000. You know what I'm saying? And like I said, the average stay is 200 days in the jail. You got guys people that went in there for DWI and never walked out. And I'm like, I'm not talking about got into a car and killed somebody. I'm talking about they just got pulled over, DUI, drunk, and 5 days later they coming out of the jail on a gurney, and for what? For a $10,000 bond, and that's happened a couple times last year. You have one of those DWI cases was what was his name? He died from the diabetic ketoacidosis because they didn't give him his medication. He came to jail with his medication, and he was in there for like 5 days and never got it, and he died from it. Um, so yeah, I mean, and that you know, that doesn't even touch on the violence in the jail. Um, from guards, between detainees, things like that. The stress level in the jail has to be crazy when you got people in there 200 days or more. You know what I mean? For stupid stuff. You know, there's so much that's going on behind the walls of that place that they're not willing to discuss. And I'm the impression that I get is that nobody wants to answer any of the questions I'm asking. And of course, I'm asking in particular because they might, incriminate themselves or something like that. So um, yeah, I've told a couple people like I'm sure you saw where the chief of the jail resigned, that Shannon Herklotz guy. Um, he that was like in the middle of my investigation, right? His office, the sheriff's department, Ed Gonzalez, like everybody got emails and phone calls from me. And when he resigned, like his resignation letter was weird. So like I'm not saying he resigned because of me or anything, but I'm not saying he didn't either. But his letter was weird because he told Sheriff Ed that he didn't see himself as part of the future of the jail that like the sheriff has a vision for. And you know, Sheriff Ed's our guy. I've met him in person. He's a likable dude. He seems to want to try to do the right things. I don't know what he's doing behind the scenes, so I can't vouch for that. But like I don't know what that Shannon dude, the chief of the jail, was referring to as far as the future that of the jail. But what I see from county officials and stuff like that is at least, you know, verbally they're trying to tell people they're trying to improve things, and they're, according to the Commission on Jail Standards, they have been implementing some stuff to try to improve some things. So the fact that the chief of the jail, as there's improvement or policies and systems being put in place, he wants to leave because he doesn't see himself as part of a better jail. Like that's my question there. So like, was he one of the bad guys, or is he one of the good guys? You know what I mean? Because like that's who's been running the jail for a long time. And if he doesn't see himself as part of the future of the jail, which is theoretically supposed to be better, what does that say? You know what I mean? That says a lot to me. And these are the kind of questions that I ask, and the kind of questions I can't get answers for. So like I'm doing this story. Everything I do is basically human rights focused. So I'm doing this story because of the attention that it was brought to me. But then in the process of doing this, I talked to so many families, like family members. Some of them won't go on the record because they're scared, and that says a lot. That they're afraid of the sheriff's department, and it just like the story can't be done. There's so much I couldn't even put in that story because it was just so long already. So I had to decide how I want to break this story down, because it's an ongoing story. There's more. I got more coming. So the next story I want to be focused on families. So that's a little deeper and a little harder, but that's where I'm at right now with it, because there's just there's a lot of like really really shady stuff going on with regard to the jail. And we already knew there was some shady stuff, but I think this is a lot deeper than what they're letting on or what people think.
Yeah, we will definitely be waiting on the rest of your reports and definitely boosting those, because I believe it. I mean,
Appreciate it.
there's plenty of bullshit going on that people have
Yeah.
even barely scratched the surface of. But and just a little bit before we move on to the next thing, can you explain SB6 and the sort of the issue around the PR bonds and how that's contributing to the issue?
Well, Senate Bill 6, which was passed in the last legislative session, was Republican attempt to reform the bail law, which was basically to try to counter bail reform that we know works, right? Um, So in misdemeanor courts and in the county and stuff like that, there's some leeway there where they can decide how to handle misdemeanor bail, things like that, because it's not you're not talking you're talking mostly traffic tickets and all that, and some other stuff. But misdemeanor bail reform proved that, and this is in various cities across the country, not just Houston, but prove that that helps drop crime by allowing people to be out in the free world and fight their cases from the free world. One, they have a better chance of beating the charge, because we already know how some of these charges are put together. They're flaky at best. So if you're out in the free world, um, they don't have that pressure on you to just cop a plea so you can get out. A lot of we already know a lot of people will plead guilty to some shit they didn't do just so they can get the hell out that jail. Because it's life or death at some point. Um, so SB6, what it does, it limited um, huge broad categories of like uh, felony charges that they can't use PR bonds for. That's one thing that's helping keep the jail overcrowded. The other thing, and this is probably the biggest issue for me. Well, it's kind of hard, but is that for everybody that goes into the jail, they have to generate a criminal history report for everybody. So that delays the progress because that criminal report could or could not be used in your bail hearing. So, something like close to 20% of people going into jail don't go to court within that first 72 hours because it's being held up by trying to generate a criminal history report. And if you're not, born, raised, and still living in Harris County, for example, if you're from out of state, for them to generate a criminal history report requires them to go to multiple agencies. And, you could be sitting there just waiting to get a bail hearing. And in some cases, people were able to afford their fines, say for like traffic ticket warrants or whatever. For example, somebody could have paid off their stuff. And, most of the time you pay, you can walk out. Well, these people are stuck in there for 3, 4, or 5 days because they're waiting on a criminal history report before they could pay their fines and get out. So that's also adding to the situation. And when you're talking overcrowding in Texas and SB6, that's a statewide issue. They're we're sending inmates to like West Texas and to Louisiana and stuff like that because they don't have room for them in the jail. One guy, Willie Davis, he died in the Louisiana jail. So, and that was early, about a year ago. So yeah, I mean, it's the SB6 just made the situation worse. And then when you have, in combination with some local judges, like Republican judges, don't want to let anybody out, and then Kim Ogg, who's insistent on pretrial release, that's how you end up with the situation we got with 10,000 people in the jail, an 11-year high. And you can't say that it's not because of SB6. You can't say it's not because of Kim Ogg, because this is an 11-year high. And ever since they've been in office, and ever since SB6, it's just steadily gotten worse. So, Kim Ogg's office could try to just deflect the blame all she wants. But, Sheriff Ed Gonzalez is right to a degree that it is a lot of the issues at the jail are because of her office. And don't get me wrong, Sheriff Ed Gonzalez has a lot to be responsible for. He has a lot to answer for. And the fact that him or his chief of staff, Jason Spencer, haven't gotten back to me, and that they'll talk to certain local news outlets because they'll carry water for them, says a lot. They only talk to the news outlets that'll carry water for them, that'll repeat whatever they say word for word and not challenge it.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I know there's actually Alec. I believe the way you pronounce his name is Alec Karen Katsanis. He actually just recently
Right. Yeah, I see.
wrote a piece for his Substack about that same issue with how, in a sense, like local media is just a sort of PR arm of law enforcement, and all the money that
Yep.
law
Yep.
enforcement is pouring into media for that. Um, but you know, can you for the next can you and to me this is the most egregious. Well, I mean it's all terrible, but the this to me the cover ups is the most egregious stuff. Can you explain the process through which jail administration avoids officially accounting for the deaths of those who's jailed, like on their books? And I know we're seeing that around the country where, in places like Alabama, like there was a man who died, and they buried him before they even informed his family. Crazy stuff like this.
Mm,
Can you talk about
yeah.
that process of how it's happening here?
Yeah, there are multiple ways here. Like, okay, so statistically, numbers wise, um, a lot of what they do is say for example, so let's take this one kid, Damian Lopez, right? He was in the jail. Don't remember exactly the charge, but it's kind of irrelevant. But he was in the jail. He ended up being after like 8 days, he was hospitalized. He was on a ventilator. He was in there on a $5,000 bond, I believe. His family couldn't afford to pay it, $500, whatever. And he's in there after like 8 days or something. He ends up in the hospital. Um, his family wasn't notified until he had a ventilator, a tube down his throat. And while he's in the hospital, somehow he got his bond reduced to a personal recognizance bond, was technically released, and then died. So his case didn't count on the 27 that the local media is reporting. Um, there are other ones. There's another one that didn't count, and then Kristen Smith. Okay, her name's been around on the news because her mom has been very vocal. A lot of press conferences. She's out there with Ben Crump. Okay, Kristen Smith. When I talked to her mom explained to me that they tried to do that to her daughter. The reason why it didn't work was she died first. But after she died, her bond was reduced from, I can't remember what, to $5,000. So her mom could have gotten her out of jail for $500 had the bond been reduced a week or two before that. But they waited till she was in the hospital, tried to reduce her bond so they could release her to her mom, and that way she dies technically out of custody. It didn't work because she died before they got the bond reduced. That to me, um, that to me was really all the evidence I needed to prove what the jail reports, because I didn't have, okay, so data, right? Data doesn't lie, right? Data doesn't lie. But sometimes data requires context, and that context, it comes in human form. Me, you, Kristen's mom. So I'm looking at the jailer reports, I'm looking at the data, I'm seeing this, and I never even caught the Kristen Smith thing. But then her mom tells me that. I go back, I look at the data, I look at the reports, and I said, holy shit, the dates said it all. And like, if you're even me who analyzed all this stuff for 5 months, still missed that because there was two dates I didn't match up. And that to me right there was like, y'all got caught in the act of trying to reduce a bond, release somebody so they wouldn't count, and they died first. Had they not died first, she wouldn't have been counted. And that's another name that we're not going to be talking about because they're not on that list. So that 27 that the local media is reporting was almost a 26, because of that. And that's the shame. So there's three, right? Two that they didn't count, one that they tried not to count. Now, how many are there that I didn't find? You see what I'm saying? I mean,
Yeah, because I've
that's
seen
bothersome to me.
the a report in Slate says 28, and then there are other
Mm-hmm.
sources that are claiming the other 330. But that's just, I mean, that's just the 30, like you said, that we know about?
that we
How many
found.
more people over the
Mm-hmm.
years have they scrubbed that we just don't? So I mean, it's all it's all a fucking nightmare. I don't know how else
Right.
to
And
say it.
again, these are the kind of questions I try to come at the sheriff's department with, and they wouldn't answer for it, right? So when I talked to the DA's office, I asked them specifically about Damian Lopez. I said, there was a kid in there, and the guy's like, no, no, no. And I could hear the computer clacking in the background. And I'm like, what do you want to know about the case? I'll tell you everything you want to know. And he looked it up, and I was like, and this is his words, oh shit. And I'm like, yeah, you see how that looks, right? I'm like, you see how that looks, right? And he didn't say a word. He didn't say a word. And
That's it.
I
Yeah,
asked him, how does that happen? He didn't
yeah.
answer. Instead, he emailed me a statement from his boss, not Kim Ogg, but her PR guy. Sent me a one sentence statement from my article. I was like, y'all shady, man. And that's the same guy who tried to hook me up with a special favor with this little job for a local magazine doing restaurant reviews, little 350,
Sneaky,
400 word.
damn.
Right. This is how he described it.
Ooh,
Man, $450 a piece, 400, 500 words tops. You get to eat for free. I'm like, yeah, man. Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, man. Who am I supposed to call? I wrote everything down,
damn.
and I just played along with it. Right. I just played along with it. And like, I sat on that for like 2 days. And I thought, that wasn't just unethical. I'm like, that motherfucker was trying to set me up. Like, that's illegal on top of unethical. And then what would it have done to me after my story come out? And then they're like, oh, look, he took special favors from the DA's office. Nah, not me, man. Not me.
Oh, they
You
were
got me mixed
they
up.
Harris County running a dirty game. Harris, I'm not
I'm
surprised.
telling
I'm not
you.
surprised. I'm not
And that's why
surprised.
that's why I get nervous. That's why I get scared. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I mean, applause to you for holding up your integrity, man. I mean, that's
Man, I
priceless.
I talked to my wife about it. I talked to my wife about it, and she was like, because we've had our dealings with cops. Like, she's been choked out by a cop. I've had my ass beat by cops. So like, she's like, ain't nothing ain't been through before. She's like, fucking do it. It's like, all right, So you gotta
I
do what
hear
you gotta
that.
do, man. I just didn't want to put my family at risk. You know.
I hear that. I hear that. Can you um another part of it is just the treatment of mentally of mental health in general there. Can you talk can you talk more about like how the criminal legal system just like here fails to properly care for these individuals and manage them? I mean, one story that really I just found to be fucking just insane was you told a story of a young man. I believe he was 20. He had a history of severe mental illness that was documented. They placed him in isolation by himself with no medication, and I believe he ended up taking his
Mm-hmm.
own life. Can you talk about just like Harris County jails like history with mentally ill folks?
Well, it's the largest jail in the state, third largest jail in the country. And it's often referred to as the largest mental health facility in the state. Um, it's not a mental health facility. It's the largest building that incarcerates mentally ill people. That's all it is. They don't provide mental health services, not sufficiently. When you got people sitting in an isolation tank or in a holding cell or wherever, and they have serious mental health issues and they're going 5 days, 10 days without their medication, that's a disaster waiting to happen. There was one case, this one lady who chose to remain anonymous, she didn't have her medication for several days. She thought she was going to die. And when they finally got her the medications, they gave her somebody else's meds and nearly killed her anyway. I'm like, Jesus, guys, like what? So here you have the facility, right? They have a whole floor at Ben Taub dedicated to the Harris County Jail, right? They use it for everything. They also have sort of little hospital facilities in the building. But I mean, they're overwhelmed because they won't let anybody out pretrial. They won't pretrial release anybody. And why do you have people like Kristen Smith and Damian Lopez and people in there for DUIs for so long like that? Like these people, they're not getting their insulin, they're not getting their Xanax or whatever they need to get through. They're not. So if they're not being beaten by guards or by other detainees, they're dying for a lack of medication. So like 80% of the people today, I just checked the dashboard before I got on here with you. 80% of the people uh, in the jail register on the mental health indicator. Only 30% get medication for it. And that's current. That's today. That's how it was when I wrote the story. That's how it was when I started the story. That's how it is today. And again, majority of them are in there on a $10,000 bond or less. Um, don't get me wrong. There's a substantial amount of people in there for violent crime, but there's a substantial amount of people in there for nonviolent crime too. So you have to weigh that. And again, people, for every case that you hear about on the news about somebody committing another crime while they're out on bond, there's probably 1,000 more people that are out on bond, pretrial release, that are just happy to be with their families, keeping their jobs, keeping their rent paid, their cars paid for. A lot of people just getting on with their life that ain't out here, reoffending and you know so that recidivism isn't there. But if you watch the news, the local news, you'd think everybody who's out on bond is reoffending, and that's just simply not the case. It's really not. So yeah, it's a failure across the board from the jail, with the help of media, propping up certain stories and burying others. So yeah, I mean, the jail just doesn't have the jail can't do what people think it can, as far as mental health goes, as far as people's health goes. And the purpose of keeping mentally ill people behind bars like that without medication, it just, there's no real justification for it. You know, Kim Og likes to, her office is always pushing the narrative of, well, if you didn't commit the crime, you wouldn't be at risk in jail. And it's like, lady, these people are presumed innocent. Just because they've been arrested of something doesn't mean they deserve to be in there. So you can't use that argument, not if you're defending the Constitution like you're supposed to. So yeah, it's an institutional problem, top to bottom.
And what are the demographics of Houstonians that are being, I'm pretty sure anyone who uh listens has read your work or listens to Belly of the Beast already knows what the answer is, but I'm still going to ask the question. What are the demographics of Houstonians that are being, disproportionately impacted or primarily impacted by the crisis?
Um, well, it's basically been pretty steady, but again, I checked the dashboard today, and it's just under 50% black, um, right around 25% white, 25% Latino. And mind you, about 1,000 Latinos are in there on ICE holds, so they're being held for ICE. Um, and so yeah, that it's mostly black people, and it's mostly, well, I can't say mostly, BS crimes, but there's a substantial amount that aren't felony or that are nonviolent felony. And that those are really, honestly, I don't know why any nonviolent offender is incarcerated. I don't know why anybody's incarcerated, period. But I don't know, nonviolent offenders, particularly, it's almost like, why even question whether they should be in there or not? Like, I can see if somebody, you know, um, beat their wife or something like that, right? You may not want to let them out. You may want to think some things over. But if you got some dude who got busted with a nickel bag or a DWI or something like that, what are we talking about? Like, who's he a threat to? Did they kill somebody? No, they didn't. Then why keep him in there? It just doesn't make sense to me. It's dumb. It really is. And we're talking about probably 3,000 to 4,000 people that probably shouldn't even be in there. Most people would say, yeah, they don't need to be in there. Even rural people in podunk out here, the racist types, they'd be like, yeah, he probably don't need to be in there, but they don't know because the news don't tell them.
Yeah, and I
I mean,
wanted to
that's
bring up
just that's
the.
just
Oh no, no, go ahead.
go ahead.
No, no, I just wanted to bring up
No,
the
I was just going to say
demographics
that's
question.
basically. Go ahead.
Oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I just wanted to bring up the demographics question because I mean, recently there was a recent controversy at the DA's office with a district attorney. I cannot remember his name.
Oh,
He's a black man, but he just got in trouble because he had some old tweets, old social media posts of his surface in which he was saying very colorist and racist things about black women. And so we know that um, co- colorist, there's particular data on this, like colorism is real in regards to policing, is real in regards to prosecuting. And so, when these colorism does affect who goes to jail, and it is mostly dark skinned people, not just dark skinned black people, but dark skinned, Latino and Hispanic people. So that's why I wanted to bring up the demographics issue. I don't know if you've seen some of that on your end at all.
yeah, I did actually. That also happened. During my investigation, and it was during the time where I didn't really have any communication with the DA's office. It was after that shakeup, because in the PR department, they'd gotten rid of some people too quietly. Um, they I don't know if there was any relation to any kind of racial stuff, but I thought the timing was kind of odd to change your PR people right after that happened. Um, but that was when I finally got in and started talking to people because there was all new PR people in there, and I guess I must have just caught them at the right moment that they responded to one of my emails. Um, but yeah, I did see that, and I mean, come on, we already know that in the criminal justice system, from law enforcement to probation to prosecutors to whoever, there is a very, anti non-white people bias there, especially towards black people. And it's it. What's the name of that kid? He's about to be tried for the third time for supposedly killing his parents. Can't remember
I
his
can't
name, but I mean,
I can't remember his name, but I know that
you,
story. Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Like, you couldn't convict him once, you can't convict him twice. You really gonna push a third time? You're gonna push a fourth time if you don't get it this time too? Like, if you ain't figured it out now, or if you somehow ruin that case, that's on you. That's on the cops. That's on the DA. That ain't why are you putting this kid and their family and all this stuff through all this hell? And it just doesn't make it again. It doesn't make sense because there's obviously a motivation there that nobody's talking about. And when you look at the population of the people in jail and the deaths and the demographics of the deaths, and it's pretty wild, man. Like, this is where, like, the local news again fails us because they don't look at things, and they look at it from the police perspective. They take everything police say as fact, so, for example, right, the media will use allegedly all the damn time, right? But, like, they just had to chase down some mass shooter somewhere, and they were like, oh, the mass shooter committed suicide. They didn't say allegedly. We don't know if the cops, killed him while he was had his back turned to him. We don't know none of that. But they'll tell you, they won't say allegedly killed himself. they're going to take the cop's word for it and say, yep, he committed suicide. He didn't want to be arrested, so he died. He took his own life. And I question those every single time because they never say allegedly, and they always say police say. And then, don't even get me started on police unions. You know what I mean?
My
Ugh,
my my
police
favorite is
unions, man.
officer involved shooting. But that's my all
Oh, yeah.
time.
Mm-hmm.
That's the go to.
Yeah.
When a cop has clearly shot and killed someone, they will say officer involved shooting. It's the
Yep.
wonderful Orwellian language game that the
Right.
media
Right.
has going on.
And I mean
But that,
that's essentially that's what it's about. It's about the rhetoric and the language that you use, and that's how you drive narratives. And like, you see it in these local media outlets, and whether the individual reporter is conscious of it or not, I think is kind of irrelevant because they're still pushing a narrative that's just pro police, blindly pro police.
Absolutely, and that actually leads right into my next question: is how large of a role would you say that media, not only local media but also like national corporate legacy media, played in this ongoing crisis? And to kind of frame that question more, I'm really talking about last year, especially around the time of like the midterm elections. I'm thinking about the race for the Harris County judge with Linda Hidalgo versus the fascist from the Heights,
Yeah,
Alexandra
Alex
Del
Mueller.
Mueller, um, where and a large part of that was around this fear mongering about a rise in crime, a rise in violent crime. You know what I mean? Um, and all the confusion around that. And again, Alec wrote a great piece of Substack calling out the Houston Chronicle for endorsing fascism because they endorsed Mueller, because and their whole thing. And God, I mean, I don't know who the fuck is writing for the editorial board because everything that they do is just contradictory nonsense. It's unbelievable to read. But their whole thing was, well, we need tough on crime. We need a tough on crime person. So can you talk about the go deeper in on the media on this issue?
Yeah, so national media. Let's get that one out of the way. Again, we have the rise in police violence. I mean, huge spike in police violence the last year, and a big spike in jail deaths. It's a national story. It should be a national story because it's happening in major cities all over the country, even small towns. So there's a huge failure there. For the media is just kind of looking away from it, which kind of falls in line with the whole Biden refunding police and throwing them billions of dollars for no good reason. But um, as far as like local media is concerned, and sorry, I gotta get my charger here. But as far as local media was concerned, with like uh, Alex Mueller, and I'll always call her Alex Mueller because she's a fake Hispanic. Like, okay, so she one of
I
them that
thought
lived her
so.
whole life
Yeah, I
pretending to be
thought
white.
so.
Okay, pretending to be white, right? And she's going to go up against Lena Hidalgo, right? So she goes all of a sudden, all her political. If you look at the official documents, it's Alex Mueller, but all her political signs are Alexandria Del Moral. Man, don't even come with me with that stuff. Like
Yeah, is
it's
is
not gonna work, man.
is it
So
her whole thing like the I read the profile on her. She's from the Heights. We know that's like as wide as it can get. And I think she married into a Latino family or something of that nature, or her grandfather. I can't remember exactly what it was. So she had some connection. But in general, I mean, when you see her, this is a white person. you know
right, I mean, she doesn't speak Spanish. She doesn't like. So campaigning wise, right? Like I'm like border, city limits, kind of Cypress area, right? So like I got my doctor's office in Tomball. I got to go to every month, so I got to drive through. I take back roads because it's faster from where I'm at. So I seen all the signs and all this stuff. And the one thing I noticed was that she campaigned outside the city limits. You know, she did a perimeter outside the city limits. And I kind of called her out on it because I was like, she never came anywhere near my neighborhood, but just outside my neighborhood, I saw her signs everywhere. And like, I called her out on it, and I'm like, is it because you're afraid of like actual Latinos and Black people, and like you're afraid of like talking to people who have like real issues, or you just want to talk to these white people out here, right, in the rural parts and all that. So yeah, and like the vote was pretty much divided like that. She got most of the rural vote. Lena Hidalgo got all the inside the city limits vote. So yeah, local media, you saw Mattress Mac, you saw a lot of old media heads out there trying to push Mueller. Um, I can tell you Latinos didn't buy it, and obviously Black people didn't buy it. A lot of people didn't buy it, and um, and when it comes to Mattress Mac, there's some shady stuff there too. So, that's not necessary. If you're trying to win the non-white vote, you don't do it with Mattress Mac. Let's just put it that way. So yeah, it was the whole thing was weird to see like Wayne Dolcefino and like Dave Ward. Like that dude, like really old. I didn't even know, honestly, didn't know he was still alive, but I was really kind of surprised and really kind of upset at the same time because I watched these dudes on TV for like ever, and then all of a sudden they're trying to take sides with somebody who was going to deny the election. We knew that, if she lost, she was going to deny it, and here they are trying to overthrow it or whatever. Mattress Mac turned into my pillow guy, like with all his crazy mess. Um, yeah, so again, like during that whole election thing, what we heard about the spike in crime, rise in violent crime, this, right? Bail reform and blah blah blah, and everything was to blame. And that's when all these reports were coming out saying that misdemeanor bail reform works, that the rise in violent crime was short lived and it's going back down. The other thing that came out too on a national level was that the rise in violent crime was largely in rural America. It was white men killing their wives with guns. And man, since COVID, I know I can't be the only one who thinks that murder suicides almost every day on our news is kind of weird.
Yes,
Like,
yes. Particularly the case of the man who was attempting to burn, who was attempting to burn down his parents-in-law's home because his wife was living there.
oh yeah.
And then there was the police didn't respond. I believe this was somewhere out in Katy. I can't remember exactly where it was, but the cops were delayed in their response, even though neighbors called about him in his home being weird. And then he tried to burn, when the cops did come, he tried to burn down the house on himself. Very bizarre. Like
Mm-hmm.
that was just, I mean, the fact that that didn't get more, like, I don't know, that you're right. There's something very bizarre happening. Yeah.
And the rise in violent crime, though, too, when it comes to rural America, that has to be that has to have something to do with the change in the gun laws in the last legislative session too, where they allowed basically anybody and everybody to have a gun without a license, without anything. Um, I'm a gun owner, right? Like I like to go to the gun range and shoot. And my kids are all grown now, so and my youngest is 19, and I mean everybody got their guns. We have our thing, right? But on we didn't support that law. I don't know any gun owner who went through, like I did, who went through the classes to be able to carry a concealed handgun. I don't know a single gun owner who went through those classes who said, "Yeah, let's go ahead and let everybody carry a concealed gun." The reason we got a gun was because in some places we didn't feel safe. Like I used to be government contractor, did utility work and stuff like that. And man, I kept a gun in my truck for for good reason. Like sometimes you have people that are just crazy, like if you got to go digging through their property, or maybe you have an employee that's, got issues, so, sometimes you're carrying around a ton of cash, you want to have that gun. So I got my license to protect myself. I did not to just give everybody the same thing, like I think people should have classes. I think there should be universal background checks. I think there should be a lot of things when it comes to gun laws. And I think that the rise in violent crime in Texas is a good reason why you don't do what Greg Abbott did. Because, I mean, there for a minute, we were right up there with Illinois, right? So, like, you got all these rednecks, right? Chicago, Chicago, which is just a code word for, the N word, right? They're just trying to be racist. So then I threw it up in their face. I'm like, what do you mean Chicago? We're like half a percentage point ahead of them. And they're, oh, what do you mean? I'm like, well, like, look at it. Illinois versus Texas. Like, more people are dying here from violent crime than Chicago. You can't keep saying Chicago. And it's been Republican run over here since Ann Richards. Like, we're talking 20 some years now. So, you can't blame all that. They could sit here and say Democrat run cities, blah, blah, blah. Now, when you have Republican leadership who's been running the show this whole time, that's where all that stuff falls. So yeah, I mean, you got, yeah, I mean, the rise in violent crime is more rural than it is in the cities. And again, like local news doesn't talk about that. They don't want to say, oh, look, I mean, they'll tell you murder suicide here in the suburbs all the time, but they'll never tell you how that relates to the rise in violent crime, because that's where a lot of it is. It's, spousal. It's a husband shooting his wife or something.
Absolutely, and yeah, and that tracks with like just I mean just the nature of shootings in general. Um, it's mostly people who know one another. It's not these mass spree
Right.
killings. You know what I mean? And yeah, I mean, I love the Democrat run cities meme amongst Republicans. I mean, when you look at the data, I mean, it's clear what the worst governed cities
Right.
are. I mean, it's clear. Um,
Right.
but I mean, it's just funny. And speaking to that, in terms of ideology, what do you think are like the particular ideological biases at play with like the district attorneys, the prosecutors, the judges here? Because it's so odd, because it's clearly like this neglect, this abuse, this mismanagement is clearly a bipartisan issue. It's not just like Republicans being shitheads, it's Democrats too. Like you said, it's everyone pointing the finger at one another. And the fact that the district attorneys there, I mean, you look at Kim Ogg. Kim Ogg, I believe, is a Democrat. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but she ran on this sort of like progressive prosecutor shtick, which I'm always skeptical of because you're still a fucking prosecutor.
Yeah.
But you ran as a progressive prosecutor, but I mean, just the aggressive. I mean, it's so aggressive and bestial the way that they're just prosecuting. I mean, you're gonna keep all these people pre-trial, even if they have the money to post bail. You're gonna make them wait, God knows however long, how many days to get a bail hearing, and just, I mean, it's all so irrational that to me, it has to come down to like these people. And I don't like do this. I don't normally like to do this. I like to look at the systemic, the structural stuff rather than the individual stuff. But it's like these people. Is it just that they believe in punishment? Like I don't know what it is.
You
What do
know,
you think?
it's weird because like I said, like how Kim Ogg's office has this narrative of, if you didn't commit the crime, you wouldn't be in that situation. Um, the other thing too, like that she likes to throw out there is, um, It's not fair for victims' families to have to wait 3, 4, and 5 years for justice. Okay, I get that. I get where she's coming from, and it's not a really controversial type of position, but she uses it like a hammer. That's her justification for everything. That's how her justification for pretrial detention, for seeking the stiffest sentence, for trying to force people to plea, without even proving their guilt. That's her justification for everything. And when you beat something like that, like a dead horse, it kind of speaks volumes, because it's that whole repetitive thing that people talk about when they talk about Nazis and stuff. It's you're trying to beat everybody with the same narrative until I don't know if she just thinks that everybody's just going to be like, oh, you know what, you're right. Because I mean, in some sense, she is right, but in a whole lot of other senses, she's way wrong. So she so yeah, the ideological differences there are, like you said, she ran as a progressive prosecutor, but how can you be progressive when you're a prosecutor? um there's that, like she didn't really follow through on anything, like she insinuated that she was going to make all these improvements, but never really like gave you anything solid. So when she failed to come through, it's hard to say, hey, you didn't do this what you said you were going to do, because she was so general about it. But you look at a guy like Sheriff Ed Gonzalez. Like I said, it seems like he's trying to do the right things. He puts out the appearance that he's trying to do the right things. And to me, like I said, I met the guy. He's a likable dude. Then again, Dan Crenshaw was a likable dude. He's just a shit, So nobody likes Dan Crenshaw, really. He was just, I mean, you meet him in person, you don't know his politics. You might be like, hey, this is a pretty good dude. I might have a beer with him, watch some sports. But once you start knowing like what he's about, you're just like, this dude's a prick. So, I mean, Sheriff Ed could be that guy, or he could be the guy that he, portrays himself to be. But you see the ideological difference when Ed Gonzalez butts heads with Kim Ogg, or when Kim Ogg starts constantly coming after Lena Hidalgo. They're both supposed to be Democrats, right? Both supposed to be progressives. So where's this ideological difference? And it's obviously Kim Ogg not being who she says she is, because okay, so to me, I think that Kim Ogg comes after Lena Hidalgo because she racist. That's all there is to it. She doesn't like the fact that there's a young Latina woman there, an immigrant there. I think that's part of it.
For sure. That's
That
absolutely part of it, yeah.
so obviously I can't prove it, but that's my opinion. But and I think that like sometimes maybe Kim Log does something to spite everybody who's come at her. So maybe she does things to spite Ed Gonzalez. When I believe it was the other day, the commissioner's court or maybe city council, somebody was talking about potentially letting out a lot of pretrial release, felony pretrial releases, nonviolent. And here comes Kim Ogg, going to talk to Channel 13, and she's going to say, what? It's not fair to the families to have to wait 3, 4, and 5 years for justice. What does that have to do with pretrial release? The reason they're waiting 3, 4, and 5 years for justice is because of her backlog. There are 40,000 felony cases on her in her books right now, and it's not getting any smaller. It's getting bigger. They talked about adding more judges. That's not going to solve the problem. How is it not? I mean, not doing nothing is not solving the problem. So we have to do something, right? But she wants to just keep beating that dead horse about families shouldn't have to wait for justice. And I get it. I get it. You've said it 1,000 times. We get it. And in some sense, you're right. They shouldn't have to wait that long. But that's on you. You're the prosecutor, you're the DA, you're the office that handles that. You can't blame the judges, you can't blame the sheriff, and you can't blame Chief Finner, you can't blame HPD. That's you, that's your department. So if families are waiting 3, 4, and 5 years for justice, that's on her and only her, because she
And
won't bend, she won't give at all.
and the other part of that too is like this statement doesn't even make sense for non-violent offenses. It's just you can't
Right.
just. I mean,
Right.
it's this like you said, just the blatant stupidity of it is like. I mean, are all of these people violent offenders? I mean, how do we? And again, how do we even
Right.
know that that is the case? Because they haven't been to trial. Like it's so bizarre. It's so strange. Yeah.
Exactly. They like that. That's the thing. They haven't been to trial, right? So like, you're taking people who are presumed innocent and treating them as guilty. Like you don't know that the family's going to get justice by trying this guy because that might not be the guy. You don't know that for sure. You don't. And obviously every case is different. You're going to have more evidence that proves your case or whatever. But in most cases, like I said, they only convict just under 40% of cases that are more than like 300 something days old. So and then most of those cases end up with the people back out in the community on probation, and the vast majority of them don't reoffend. So why even bother? Just get rid of cases that are 300 something days old. Maybe not murders, maybe not certain things, but there are plenty of them out there. I mean, there's 40,000 cases on the books. You can't tell me that you won't make a dent by doing that, by just getting rid of some of them. It's not. It's expensive for the county. It's what I mean. Like Kim Ogg just got 18 million more dollars to hire more prosecutors so they could prosecute more cases. And it's like, dude, do you not see the problem here? Like stop. Well, you have to stop at some point. You can't just keep throwing money
Yeah.
at people that it just doesn't make sense. It really doesn't make any sense.
And that
Not
that was
politically, not.
yeah. It's mind boggling. And that leads into my next question. So as this continues, I mean, we're already in a crisis, but as this continues, like when do you believe that Harris County is going to reach a breaking point? Are we already at a breaking point to where like the system is going to become totally unmanageable? And if so, like when and how will it happen? If you think that's the case.
Well, breaking point. This has been a question that I've been asked. Just personal level, like my family and stuff. Like, will it reach a breaking point? And I've had time to put some thought into it, and I don't know. I hate to say that I don't know that there is a breaking point for the Harris County Jail, um, unless the state does the breaking. Um, because okay, so like Brandon Wood, the executive director of the Commission on Jail Standards, right? I talked to him for a long time for the article, and I asked him essentially. I didn't use the words breaking point, but what does it look like when the state intervenes, right? What happens? And I was like, does the state take over? And he told me the state doesn't have the authority to take over, kind of like the Texas Education Association wants to take over HISD. He's like, we don't have that authority. He's like, we do have the authority to close the jail if needed, and we can pull certifications. Um, he wasn't very clear as to like what the limit is, at what point, um, and these are follow up questions I'm getting from the families, right? That I intend to come at him with, because me and him ended on good terms. We still talk, we talked real, and we communicated, swapped cell phone numbers and stuff. So it was a pretty good conversation, which is kind of weird for a position of authority that I consider sort of fascist, Like, I mean, he is the Commission on Jail Standards. They oversee the jails, but it's still, they let jails get away with a lot. So, um, but again, he seemed like a likable dude. I just not appreciative of his position. But he did like, he had said, for me, follow up questions for him are what's the limit? Because last week they just failed another week long inspection, right? They're still out of compliance. They were out of compliance when my article came out. They've been out of compliance for over a year, it seems like. Um, but no certifications have been taken. No talks of closing the jail. One thing he mentioned that caught me was that the reason why he referred to closing the jail as a nuclear option. Um, but he also mentioned something that led me to believe that they're nowhere near considering it, and that's he said, if we close the jail, what do we do with 10,000 detainees? And my first thought was, well, you shouldn't have 10,000 detainees, bro. Like maybe 4,000. But in the end, what do you do with them, right? And that's a good point. What do you do? That there's no alternative, and that's the big issue. And I think that people like Sheriff Ed Gonzalez and Kim Ogg, they all know that there's no alternative. They all know that the jail won't close because they can't close it, and that's how they feel about it. So they're just going to keep doing whatever they're going to do because there's no consequence. And for somebody like Sheriff Ed Gonzalez, who has so many people who work under him, like the chief at the jail, who was an assistant sheriff or whatever, assistant chief, and all these people under him that can easily be scapegoats, right? So, the Shannon guy resigned. Sheriff Ed Gonzalez swore that it wasn't anything, that he wasn't forced to resign, that it wasn't anything he made him do. But behind the scenes, do we really know that? Do we really know that that was the case? Um, how do we know that if the shit hits the fan tomorrow, Sheriff Ed's not going to say, well, Shannon was the chief at the time. Go after that guy. You don't, it's hard to tell because there's no real oversight there. The Commission on Jail Standards isn't like in his office. They're not watching his every move. Um, the sheriff's department refuses to give up any video of what's going on in the jail, you know, ref- referring to particular cases. So, like, we don't really know what's happening behind the scenes. And there's a lot of secrecy there. And when they failed this last inspection, Brandon Wood told local media that it's going to take more than cleaning the jail to pass an inspection, because apparently they tried to clean the place up and make it look as decent as possible, but didn't try to fix anything else. And his words to his new press release that every news outlet repeated was that it's going to take more than cleaning the jail to pass an inspection. So this guy Shannon, like, or not Shannon, but Brandon Wood at the Commission on Jail Standards, like, he doesn't pull no punches, right? So if he says, if he were ever to tell me that he's coming after them, I'm going to believe him 100%, because he's not laying off as far as like being lenient on them with passing certain inspections and things like that. But like I said, talking to the families moving forward, I have a lot more questions for them this time. And like, what happens to the jail, for example, if they pull certifications that qualify that jail to handle mental health patients, for example? What happens to the mental health patients if they take that certification away? What happens to, addicts? What happens to, if you take all these things away, you take their certification to have medical staff in the jail, what does that do? So what, it's hard to fathom where a solution is without some sort of sanctions, penalties, something. Just saying, "Oh, you're out of compliance," isn't changing anything. The jail's been out of compliance, like we said, for like a year. So what does continuing to say they're out of compliance, they're out of compliance, what does that do? It doesn't do anything. We already know 4 people died in the jail just in the first month this year. And I was sitting here thinking to myself yesterday, are we going to make it out of February without a death in the jail? Will this be the first month in like years to not have the death in the jail? And then I started thinking, well, if somebody dies in the jail, we're probably not going to know about it until March or April, to be truthful. So will we make it out of February? I don't know. I'll hit me back in April and I'll let you know if we do, because, you know, I can sit here and try to monitor the Attorney General's website where they keep track of the deaths and all the jail reports and all that stuff. But I mean, let's be real. Like, they don't always publish on time. They're supposed to have a report when somebody dies. They're supposed to have a report within 24 hours. There were over a dozen cases of deaths last year where it took a month to get a jail report from the Attorney General's office. So it's not, the system's busted everywhere. And the fact that you have Republicans at the top that have the same attitude as Kim Og. If you didn't break the law, you wouldn't be in the jail. You wouldn't be in this situation. They all have that same attitude. They don't care. For my story, I contacted every state representative, every state senator, senators in Washington, congresspeople in Washington. Not a single one, not a single one gave me the time of day. Not one. And man, my list is long. I have a spreadsheet with like 50, 60 people I contacted. And like you read the article, I talked to a handful of people in comparison, not even 10%, because nobody cares. And that is the saddest part of the whole fucking thing. Krish at the Texas Jail Project said this to me one day, and it sticks. She said, when we talk about public safety, we never talk about the safety of the people in the jail. And she's like, they're there under the protection of the public. Like, and that sticks with me every time. Nobody cares. And it just blows my mind.
And to add to that, I mean, that's because incarcerated people are completely and totally dehumanized. They're totally
Yeah.
dehumanized when they're in there. I mean, even the term. I mean, that's why people should let go of the term. Inmates and all this shit
I
that you
try not to
called. I
use
mean,
that.
like these are human beings, right? And
Yeah.
I mean, it's so yeah, they're totally dehumanizing you, and you remove out of that any sort of restoration, any sort of redemption, any sort of forgiveness. You remove all of that, and it's just pure all punitive, and
Mm-hmm.
it's sad and it's disgusting. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, recently I think that the FBI just announced that they're going to be doing probes and
Mm-hmm.
investigations into Harris County, which we'll see how that goes. That could possibly force the state to step in. But I mean, during the meantime, I mean, we already are overcrowded to where they have to outsource folks to other prisons, and it's just like, what is to me, I don't know. I feel like the breaking point has to be just so many. It has to be so many deaths that they can't cover up that get exposed to the public, or that it's just the overcrowding reaches a ridiculous point to where people just cannot ignore it. Like, where are you going to house all these people? And the only thing that I could think of is, maybe Harris County again trying to outsource to other prisons. But that's, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's more money out of their pocket to have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then um the yeah, there's more money out of their pocket to do that. And then, like, how is that going to affect how cops do what they do, arresting and detaining people? Like, is there going to be a freeze on that? I mean, like, are you not going to be able to arrest people anymore because you don't have anywhere to send them? Like, it's all this. To me, I think it would have to get to that level to where it's like, this is fucking outrageous. To me, that's what I would
Mm-hmm.
think the breaking point is. Or they start trying to, we have an Atlanta sort of deal where they start trying to build new facilities to not
Mm-hmm.
to train cops but to house people in, or you start rocking with the private prison complex to put. I mean, those are the only options that I could see as to how they could deal with this if they just don't stop. I don't know. Maybe that's all far fetched, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a thing, man. Like, HPD in particular and Kim Og's office are both have chosen to prosecute smaller crimes, because of the rise in violent crimes. And there's this whole, it's a new version of like broken windows policing, right? And the idea is to stop this dude before he does something worse, and that's assuming he's going to do something worse, right? It's all presumptuous, it's all prejudicial, it's all um, yeah, it's just it's out of control. The amount the commissioner's court had to approve like $39 million so they can send 600 people to West Texas, right? Then you have those guys that are in West Texas. Some are pretrial. They can't get a hold of their attorneys. They're missing court dates because they're 500 miles away. They don't have transports that come to Harris County every day. So some people are missing court dates. Some people can't talk to their lawyers. Some people, they're losing their jobs, can't get a hold of their families. Their families think they're in Harris County jail, but they're really in freaking, Louisiana or something. Um, it's all just, it's wasteful as far as spending goes. And the the toll on the human condition, on what it does to a person to lose everything, their jobs, their homes, their everything over something as little as $1,000, to get out of jail. And, if you can't afford it, there it goes. It's all gone. So there's there's a certain level of inhumanity there. And the more you bring it up and the more they ignore you, the more intentional it becomes. The more obvious the intentional nature behind it becomes. So, for example, Kim Ogg is aware of what people are saying about her office, about all the things people have, the ideas that different organizations have come up with to alleviate overcrowding in the jail, and she just ignores them. She knows all that information is there. She knows the data is accurate. She knows that she can easily alleviate the overcrowding in the jail by following some of these ideas, but she refuses to. So that makes what she's doing intentional. It's not, this isn't for no victims' families. This isn't for, she's making somebody pay. I think she's being vindictive in a sense, whether it's towards Lena Hidalgo, Ed Gonzalez, both, the whole commissioner's court, you know, I don't know, but there is something there that hasn't been uncovered yet about Kim Ogg, and I don't, I hope I'm the guy to uncover it, but I don't care who does. I don't care if it's a local person at Channel 13 or Fox or whoever. It's just like when Sheriff Ed Gonzalez wouldn't talk to me, and I was very public about my investigation because I started getting nervous. So I was making sure all my readers knew what I was doing, what's happening, and didn't really give away the meat of the story. But I told Sheriff Ed Gonzalez, look, you may not talk to me, but eventually you're going to talk to somebody. And whether it's me or not, I don't care. I want the truth. The families want the truth. The families want answers. They deserve answers. So if you want to go tell it to your favorite journalist, go tell it to them. If you want to tell it to me, tell it to me. But I don't care. I said eventually you will have to answer for all of this. And you can push it off all you want, but you're going to have to. Kim Ogg will have to. I mean, the more attention we put on it, and the more pressure we put on them, the more we'll force them to have to answer for it. I mean, and that's just all there is to it. And I think that in the case of the jail, we're lucky to have a guy like Brandon Wood at the Commission on Jail Standards, as opposed to like say a Dan Patrick or a freaking Rick Perry there. Some real hardcore Republican racist redneck type. Um, I don't really know Brandon Wood, but the fact that he's being proactive and pushy, and he actually took time when families went to Austin to talk to the Commission on Jail Standards and stuff like that. He actually took the time to talk to individual family members in private in his office. And like, he talked to Kristen Smith's mom, to Deborah. He talked to a lot of people's families. And I'm not going to ask him what was discussed. I'm not going to ask the families what was discussed. That was between them and him. And if they want to tell me about it, great. But I'm not going to ask, because that was personal for the families. And the fact that he did it behind closed doors, individually, not the whole all the families at once. He took individual families and talked to them. Says a lot, because he did it not for the publicity. He did it for the family. So to me, like I said, he may not be the greatest guy in the world. I don't know him from, the dude at the corner store, but it just seems like he's a pretty proactive guy, and it seems like he's really pushing. And we're just lucky to not have somebody who's way worse in that position.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Thank you for that, and thank you so much for talking with me for so long. I want to be respectful of your time, so I'm just gonna wrap up with these last two questions.
No, you good.
What forms of direct action can community members and grassroots organizations engage in to combat the crisis? And what local organizations would you encourage people to support who are fighting on this issue?
Yeah, I'm not much of an organizer. And I don't want to take away anything from anybody from organizers who do really good. You know, as far as orgs go, the Texas Jail Project is a good one. The Alex Org, the Civil Rights Corps, they're a good one to support. Jailhouse Justice, they're on Instagram. They're relatively a new group that came together at the end of December, and they've been really active. They've been talking to a lot of families and stuff. They have like a list of demands. They do a lot of everybody that works with them are all volunteers. And here recently, they've been doing a lot of I don't know if you call it phone banking, but they're on Instagram. They'll post stuff to call Kim Ogg's office. They give you a little script, to kind of build off of things like that. And their whole thing is to put pressure on people in power. And I think that right now that's where it's at. Um, Unless all these organizations come together for some larger scale protest. I've seen a few little ones here and there. Obviously, you've had the press conferences with the lawyers and for the families, and Ben Crump. He brings attention to the situation, which is appreciative. Whatever anybody thinks of Ben Crump, because I know people are kind of back and forth on him. He does bring attention to where it needs to be when it needs to be. So, I think it helped him doing a few press conferences down here. Obviously, Quan LX always speaking up. You got a lot of people that do a lot of speaking up that I respect for doing that. But I think I think that the Jailhouse Justice little group, I think they're onto something with the phone calls, with the little scripts to keep pressure on people. Um, and I think that's kind of where we're at right now. And as far as financially supporting anybody, aside from me and you, because, I could always use all the help I can get. I'm disabled, right? So anyway, it's a long story. I can't do a lot of stuff. I'm not allowed to drive, shit like that. So I struggle. But, aside from supporting guys like us, Jailhouse Justice, the Texas Jail Project, hell, I don't know if you know Ashton Woods, Black Lives Matter Houston. Um, you know, there's a lot of little groups out here. A lot of the groups that you've interviewed, talked to like that. I think there's a lot to be done in this community. But as far as the jail goes, like I said, I think where it's at right now is putting pressure as much as possible on. And it doesn't do good to try to put pressure on judges, but definitely maybe on the sheriff's department, and definitely on Kim Ogg's office for sure.
All right, and where can people find you and your work? If you have anything to plug, go ahead and plug away.
Man, I think we pretty much covered it all. I mean, to find me online, it's at Extreme Arturo everywhere. Uh, you know, every social media site is the same at Extreme Arturo. Um, so yeah, I mean, aside from that, I don't really have much to plug. I just wanted, I wanted to give you first dibs because you're local. I want this story to get out there. I want more people to be aware of it. The whole goal here is to try to foster change in one way or another. And if that's by me doing what I do, you doing what you do, um, and what everybody else does, as long as we stay on it, be consistent, be persistent, um, and just really just put some pressure on people. You know, my job as a journalist is to speak truth to power. Some things there are no two sides to. They might tell you that, you know, a journalist's job is to be objective. Well, you know, when it comes to human rights, there's nothing to be objective about. There's a right and a wrong. When it comes to racism, there's nothing to be objective about. You know, policing, you know, the jail, there's nothing to be objective about. There's right and there's wrong. And that's where I stand on my journalism stuff. So I know that that sort of marginalized me from the broader, you know, collective of like more mainstream and corporate run journalists, but this is where I'd rather be, man. Just trying to get attention on the thing, on what we do.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I applaud that, and you've done great work. This, folks, please go and check out
Thank you.
Arturo's piece for Unicorn Riot. It's amazing. But thank you so much, Arturo, again for joining us. Thank you to everyone who's listening and supporting Belly of the Beast and what we do. This is Demetrius, Belly of the Beast, Sounds of the Beast. Y'all take care. Love, peace, solidarity. Talk to y'all next time.